When German officers first laid eyes on America's aircraft carriers, they didn't just see ships, they witnessed the future of warfare rising from the sea. Welcome to War and Warriors, where history isn't just told, it's felt. Today, we dive into the moment when German officers, steeped in the traditions of battleships and U-boats, came face to face with America's floating cities, the aircraft carriers that changed the ocean forever. When German officers first encountered America's aircraft carriers, it was not through textbooks or detailed intelligence, but through first-hand experiences on the vast ocean. At the dawn of the Second World War, the Atlantic remained the primary battleground for German naval operations, and many officers of the Kriegsmarine envisioned naval warfare dominated by battleships, cruisers, and the silent threat of U-boats. Initially, aircraft carriers were seen as a novel addition, useful in specific roles but not central to naval strategy. The Royal Navy possessed carriers, but they were limited in number and size, leading German officers to view them as relatively fragile vessels that required extensive protection. The perception of American naval capabilities began to change as reports of their strength made their way to Berlin. Early accounts from submarine commanders returning from patrols detailed immense shapes looming on the horizon, ships that defied their expectations. These were not the modest carriers known in Europe. They were floating fortresses that combined the scale of battleships with the operational capacity of airfields. German naval intelligence intercepted signals and gathered reconnaissance photos, but the reality of these carriers struck harder when officers had the rare opportunity to see them up close or analyze them post-engagement. One significant turning point emerged from the accounts of U-boat commanders who reported alarming encounters with convoys that, once thought to be easy targets, now enjoyed consistent air support, not from distant bases, but from mobile platforms at sea. These carriers deployed a fleet of aircraft capable of scouting vast stretches of ocean, forcing U-boats to submerge and evade. The dynamic of hunter and prey had shifted. For German officers accustomed to submarine operations that could strike with relative freedom, the introduction of a permanent aerial shield for convoys was profoundly disturbing. As the conflict shifted toward the Pacific, German officers maintained close watch through intelligence exchanges with their Japanese allies. Reports from this theater conveyed a mix of awe and trepidation. During the Battle of Midway, they noted not only the strategic cunning of the Americans, but also the staggering capabilities of their carriers to project military power across vast distances. For those steeped in the geography of the Atlantic, where Britain stood as a central island stronghold, it was difficult to fathom the notion of naval air power extending so far across the Pacific. Yet, the Americans had turned that concept into reality. There were instances where captured German naval officers were brought aboard American carriers for transport or interrogation. These men later recounted their experiences in disbelief, describing hangar decks that felt like immense cathedrals filled with aircraft in perfect alignment. They marveled at the mechanics of rising and lowering planes, crews operating with precision, and expansive galleys that could feed thousands in shifts. In stark contrast to the cramped confines of a U-boat or even a German battleship, the carrier resembled a floating city. The sheer scale of these vessels was perhaps the most astonishing aspect to German observers. While capital ships like the Bismarck and Tirpitz were considered colossal by European standards, they were built for heavy armor and firepower rather than air operations. An American aircraft carrier, by comparison, was similarly immense but dedicated entirely to housing air wings, fuel reserves, and facilitating constant flight. Operations. German officers couldn't help but notice that one carrier held the equivalent potential of multiple airfields moving in unison, capable of launching wave after wave of sorties. This new vision undermined their long-standing naval doctrines, which had historically focused on decisive battleship encounters and stealthy submarine warfare. Adding to their astonishment was the seemingly effortless deployment of these floating giants by the Americans. While the Kriegsmarine agonized over every operation of its limited fleet, American carriers appeared in multiple theaters simultaneously. By 1942 and 1943, intelligence reports indicated new classes of carriers being launched with astonishing speed, each one larger and more advanced than its predecessors. For German officers who had witnessed their own shipbuilding efforts hindered by resource shortages and Allied air attacks, the American capability to produce such formidable vessels bordered on the miraculous. Yet beyond the numbers and dimensions, there was a deeper psychological impact from these encounters. German officers understood that the presence of a carrier could fundamentally alter the nature of a naval engagement. A fleet supported by a carrier possessed the ability to extend its operational reach far beyond the horizon, with capabilities to engage submarines before they could even prepare for an attack. These carriers had the flexibility to support landings, disrupt enemy supply lines, and command the skies wherever they operated. For officers steeped in surface warfare traditions, this was nothing short of a revolutionary change at sea. It is no surprise that when German officers recounted their initial experiences with America's aircraft carriers, their expressions reflected disbelief. They had entered a new realm of naval power, one defined by industrial strength, advanced technology, and bold strategic vision. The floating cities they encountered were more than mere ships. They represented a profound shift in how naval warfare would be conducted and ultimately decided. To the German officers who once ruled the Atlantic depths, these carriers were more than a shock. They were a revelation. The age of steel giants had ended, and a new empire of wings and waves had begun. In their wake, the course of naval history was rewritten forever.